Alright, well, welcome to Piggy Power. I'm Piggy. You might have figured that one out already. You might already have seen a lot of my videos and got bored of my voice. Here's my voice again. It's not changing. Not anytime soon, anyway. In the previous video, you may have seen the 10 reasons why you should buy a 306. The question is, well, is there anything bad about a 306 then? Well, let's cover the 10 things, or the 10 reasons why you would not buy a 306. Top of the list, so some of these are my experience, and some of these from polls, questions I put on Instagram, at Piggy.power, and on Facebook, PiggyPowerXUD. So, some of these are your suggestions, which is great. Some of these are mine. I disagreed with some of yours, sorry. The first one, rust. Number one reason why maybe you don't want to buy a 306. And the problem with the rust is it's often hidden underneath the side skirts, which are on the side of the high-spec ones and then all the Phase 3s, the Mark 3s. People jack them up in the wrong place, it breaks the underseal, same happens at the front floor pan, and rust gets in, or damp gets in and causes rust. They don't rust naturally. The other thing is the rear left quarters. For whatever reason, some 306s didn't come with a mud guard, a shield in there, and some 306s did. But some 306s that did, people removed them because the rear axle, which I'm coming to, would rub as it wore out on that plastic. The plastic would warp over time, people would rip it out, dirt gets in the top of the arch, rusts it out, you don't even know it's happening, and the little nibblers, the rusty nibblers are nibbling at your arch. And you find out when, one, you pull on the seatbelt one day and it rips out in your hand, or two, your boot gets wet. So that's not great. But generally, rust is okay, but the number one reason it's easy to buy a bit of a lemon of a 306 is the hidden rust from people not taking care of them. Number two, rear axle repairs. The rear axle is actually within handling on a good thing for the 306. It's rear independent suspension, it's brilliant. Passive rear steering, it's brilliant. Until you need to repair them. They are expensive. They're going to cost a few £100s to have repaired properly, to be rebuilt. Now, it swings and roundabouts. If you rebuilt the whole rear suspension on a Golf, a BMW, a small BMW, an A-Series Mercedes of the same era, then, well, that costs a lot of money too. So for maintenance-free rear suspension, I don't think it's too bad, but it is an issue, and you see the old camber going in and the knocking. So that's the number two reason you've got to look out for, and might put you off buying a 306. Number three, electrics. Now, French cars, they have this reputation for bad electrics. Personally, I think it's Renaults that give us that reputation. The Peugeots I've owned haven't really been that bad, but they do suffer with two things quite common. One, earths. They break, they wear out, the earth straps, and that can cause some issues. And number two, door looms, which causes all sorts of other issues like remote central locking failures, and some other weird stuff with the windows. And it's the door looms. But then I've seen that as well with other vehicles of the same age, the Astras, the Golfs, the BMWs. But it is a problem that the 306s have. They break the wires in the door looms. Number four, probably my biggest gripe with the 306, and with other Peugeots of that era actually, there's no cup holders. Not one. There's nowhere that I can place my cup, not even for when I'm stationary. I mean, driving it would be nice to stick a cup somewhere. You know, a flask, whatever it might be. Maybe it's Costa for you, or Starbucks, or McDonald's, or other restaurants are available. But even when I'm stationary, say I've stopped and I want to have a cup of something from my flask, I've got nowhere, nothing flat in this car to put a cup on other than the floor, which I then kick over. So it's a real gripe of mine, and it was probably the number one mention on Instagram of the reason why a 306 is no good. The bad thing about a 306, no cup holders. Number five, noisy cabin. Yes, they're not as good as modern cars again. So if you're going to compare them to a modern car, not great. But a lot of people said, you know, creaks and rattles. That does happen with time. They're over 20 years old now, and you're going to find some creaks and rattles. I mean, I don't know what you can hear very well in here. All I can hear is the rain. That's pretty loud. But otherwise, it's actually pretty quiet inside the cabin of my 2000 HGI Meridian. It's a pretty nice place to be. But people do moan about squeaks and rattles. I have one rattle on the dash here. It does bug me sometimes. Number six. This was again a mention from Facebook, etc. And this is the drivers. And I thought about that, and I asked a couple of people that had said the drivers, and really it's the reputation. The 306s was in the the Power Max era, Max Power, whatever you want to call it, the tuning era, big body kits, terrible styling, and ASBOs basically. People easily can steal these things, let's be honest, and just razz around, giving us a bad reputation. So that's a negative, but that does probably depend on the area. Number 7. Number 7 is a contradiction, a bit like a couple of others I've mentioned, if you might think of it that way. The air conditioning, it doesn't work. I mean, there's a button there, and the light comes on, but not much else. I don't know of many 306s that have ever had working air conditioning. There are a few. But again, that's maintenance. There isn't other many vehicles of this age running around being used as a workhorse that have air conditioning working, to be honest. People don't regas them regularly, and when there's a leak, they don't get them fixed, and then another leak, and then there's corrosion inside the system. So it's a common issue for all vehicles of that era, I would say, in the 90s and the very early 2000s. But it's known that basically you've got air conditioning, but it ain't going to work. Number 8 on the list of things that are not great about 306. Reasons why you might not buy one. Poor storage. Now I mentioned how practical they are. You get big things in a 306, but for somewhere for your keys, coins, bits and bobs, the glove box, especially in the late ones with air conditioning, is minuscule. I mean, minuscule. I'm not kidding. And what else? There's a little place sometimes for a manual under the seat. There's no under storage heating. There's none of that either. There's no under seat storage. The pockets in the doors are a bit rubbish, to be honest. And there's a little kind of thing in the back of the seat, but you can't get much in there other than your A to Z, which no one uses anymore. It's just lacking a little bit of storage solutions, which would have been nice. And I think could have been done. The doors, maybe under the seats, a couple other places. There's no pockets like really at all on the back seat, on the back doors. Let me check. Hang on, do I know my 306s? Oh yes, tiny pocket, I can get my little finger in it. In the back doors, that could be improved. I can kind of just get my hand in the door pocket in the back, which is just big enough to get rubbish down, but not big enough to get the nozzle of a Hoover down to clean that. So that's not ideal, really. So that was storage. Yeah, little just storage solutions. That kind of comes under cup holders, but I'm going with 2 ideas there. Driving position. The steering wheel is not central to the seat. It's off to my left very slightly, which is okay. It's worse in the 106. But the pedals are also off centre. So the middle of my steering wheel is basically in the middle of the clutch and brake, but that's kind of to the left of me, which is really annoying, I'll be honest. Now there is a nice little place to put my left foot. That's great on a long journey. And other vehicles don't have that. Well, so that's nice. But my foot is always kind of like this when I'm driving. So for long journeys, that is the biggest problem I ever have, is just trying to position my right foot. It has to be a little bit upright. And the steering wheel, whilst it does go up and down, so up a bit, down a bit, it's not much. And I want it closer. I want it like there. Whoop! Don't let go. So that's annoying. It's a small gripe, but it's annoying. The driving position isn't perfect. And I know some others mentioned that as well. It's not bad. Could have been a bit better. Anyway, moving on to number 10. And this is probably the biggest problem you're going to have in buying a 306, which might just put you off. There aren't many for sale. Now people have them, and they're either projects or they're just not worth selling, so they're breaking them for parts. So to find one that's not done 1 billion miles, that hasn't got a broken rear axle, rusty rear arch, no MOT, etc., is getting a lot harder to do. There are I bought this for £450, this one. It had a very short MOT, I had to do 2 jobs to get to the MOT, and it had done about 80,000 miles, but that is getting really hard to find. The GTIs are on the up in price, so it's a good time now to buy a GTI, but a year ago you could have spent half as much and got twice as much car, in my opinion, with the GTI. And the D-turbos, well, they're all a bit ruined. People have revved them, wound them up, run them on all sorts of terrible fuels, not serviced them. They've done them well, but now they're a little bit worn out. So, they are my 10 reasons why the 306 is not so great, and you might not want to buy one. But really, the moral of the story is, go find one and have fun. Maybe you have a good argument for buying a Golf, not a 306, or buying anything but a 306. But they're my thoughts. So, I'm Piggy, this is Piggy Power, Piggy out! Right, I'm going to go home now, dry out, and see if my cameras have all survived this journey, this perilous journey down the B roads of Cotswolds.